With ongoing news that Rogue may debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the Captain Marvel sequel, it's a perfect time to dive into her history and origin and explore their history together. But before we do, let me say thank you for watching JLS Comics. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I do upload videos just like this every week. Alright, let's jump into our story. Rogue debuted in 1981 in the pages of Avengers Annual 10. It featured a very busy cover by Al Milgrom with Rogue in shadow as a quote-unquote shocking mystery guest. Michael Golden, who did interior pencils, proposed 3 additional covers, like this one, featuring a prominent Rogue holding Thor and Iron Man by the neck, while Miss Marvel looks on in shock and disbelief. Editorial went with Milgrom's busy cover over Golden's. However, this should give you an idea that her connection to Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, has persisted from her very first issue to her imminent debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. Chris Claremont, the iconic and prolific X-Men writer, initially told Golden that Rogue's look should be inspired by Grace Jones. This, as the Clarion Ledger points out, was before her turn in James Bond and Conan, and so Golden had no idea who Grace was, so he turned in something different but that Chris Claremont liked anyhow. Rogue was born as Anna Marie in fictional Caldecott County, Mississippi, to Owen and Priscilla. At an early age, her mother disappeared, victim to her own dabbling with Native American mysticism, and her father ended up abandoning her. Fending for herself at age 14, Anna would often go rogue, taking care of herself however she needed to. Anna Marie fell in love with a boy named Cody Robbins, and they kissed just as her powers began to manifest, and he passed out as their skin made contact and he was in a coma. Horrified at what she'd done to Cody, she ran away from home and was found alone in the woods by Mystique and Mystique's partner Destiny, who took her in and indoctrinated her to the ideologies and trainings of the villainous Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It turns out that Mystique had 2 other progeny, Graydon Creed, whom she had with Victor Creed, the mutant named Sabretooth, and her other son was the X-Man Nightcrawler. And so this makes them siblings, although not by blood. They do consider themselves brother and sister. Some of these early details have changed depending on the writer, but that's the gist of it. When Rogue first debuted, she was a villain, a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Mystique, though she was protective of young Rogue, wanted to exploit her power for their next plot. Rogue's mutant abilities allowed her to absorb other mutants' powers along with their memories, personalities, and really, their conscience. After the previous plot to assassinate Senator Kelly failed and the Brotherhood was mostly imprisoned, Mystique wanted Rogue to absorb the powers of Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, to free her team, and quickly finds out that she has absorbed Miss Marvel's powers permanently. But why Carol specifically? It turns out that in Marvel Superheroes issue 11 that this is answered. Destiny, Mystique's lover with the power to see the future, predicted that Carol would end up hurting their child Rogue. So they took Destiny, so to speak, into their own hands. Rogue overheard Carol and Destiny talking about this, so Rogue said, "I'm gonna handle it." And then she went to attack Carol in San Francisco later on. During her stint as a villain, Rogue fought with Rom the Space Knight and Dazzler and other X-Men. And then Jason Wingard, a supervillain named Mastermind, is the one who unbalanced Rogue's mind since she was sharing her headspace now with Miss Marvel's conscience. And when this happened, Rogue decided to leave Mystique and the Brotherhood and join the X-Men. Mystique went after Professor Xavier for what she thought was theft of Rogue. But then Rogue said no, it was her choice, and Mystique handed over guardianship of the young mutant to Professor Xavier. Carol had been in the care of Professor X as he was trying to repair her mind too, but when Rogue joined at the behest of the rest of the team, Carol showed up, now calling herself Binary, and punched Rogue right into orbit, but she was able to take the shot. Rogue met up with the X-Men in Tokyo at Wolverine's wedding with Mariko Yoshida. Rogue protected Mariko from a shot, and Wolverine ended up transferring his healing powers to her to save her because she saved his fiancé. She then saved Colossus by turning herself to his metal form so Healer could fix them. And these actions, these heroics, earned her the trust of her new team. Rogue still had Carol Danvers in her head though, and when she heard Carol's old flame Michael in her head, she attacked a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier to save him. Her mind was fighting the 2 personas for control, and she went back and forth in this mental battle. Then Rogue had to absorb the powers of fellow X-Man Nightcrawler, her brother, and Colossus in order to defeat a sentinel from the future known as Nimrod. And then tensions rose for Rogue as Dazzler then joined the team, and Rogue, along with Dazzler, Psylocke and Longshot had to fight with the villain Juggernaut. In the next story, Wolverine and Rogue were captured and held prisoner in Genosha, where mutants are slaves. And while imprisoned, Rogue was sexually molested by the guards, and she retreated into her own head to protect herself from the trauma, which allowed the Carol side of her to come out and be the dominant one. Rogue was then sucked into a portal called the Siege Perilous, and this allowed for the Carol Danvers personality to be wiped from her mind. But when she got back, she found that the X-Men's base in the Australian outback had been taken over by the Reavers, so she fled to Antarctica and the Savage Land. And then, the villain Shadow King convinced Carol Danvers that her soul couldn't be in two bodies at once. One would have to die. So Carol went to the Savage Land with the intent of killing Rogue so that she could live. Magneto, who happened to have a base in the Savage Land, took out Carol for Rogue, killing Carol, which meant that Rogue still had Carol's powers, but her psyche was now gone from her own head. So her conscience was gone, but she retained the powers of Carol Danvers. So Rogue decided after this to stay with Magneto in the Savage Land. And she teamed up with Magneto, Kazar, and Nick Fury to fight a Savage Land priestess. And when Magneto killed the priestess, Rogue was upset and went back to the X-Men's mansion in New York. When she got back, that's when she fell under the spell of one Ragin' Cajun known as Gambit. During the 1990s, the X-Men roster had ballooned exponentially. To solve this problem, the team was divided into blue and gold teams. Rogue was on Cyclops' blue team along with Gambit, Psylocke, Beast, Wolverine, and Jubilee, and this allowed Rogue and Gambit's relationship to develop even more. Gambit finally mustered up enough courage to ask Rogue out, and they started getting closer, although Gambit's wife Belladonna tried to put a stop to that. Rogue and the X-Men went to New Orleans, Gambit's hometown, to fight the Brood, who had managed to penetrate the Assassin's Guild. And during Executioner's Song, the plot to kill Professor X, a villain named Strobe damaged Rogue's optic nerves, and she was basically blinded and became depressed, lashing out at Gambit from the roof of the mansion. In Uncanny X-Men 305, during the fight with the Phalanx, Rogue touched one of the techno-organic aliens and she absorbed its powers, which turned her into a deformed, horrific shape, and so Bishop had to step in to save her. X-Men issue 38 is a prelude to her 1995 series. Belladonna and her assassins had kidnapped Cody Robbins, the boy that Rogue put in a coma when her powers first manifested, and this was in direct retaliation for what had happened in the Gambit series. But then Gambit got captured too, and so Rogue had to rescue Gambit. Later, Rogue was captured and held in Magneto's Antarctica lair. A robot called the Nanny neutralized their powers, and Rogue and Gambit were able to get close, although she found out something about his past, and he didn't want to talk about it. So Rogue went off, and this small team had to find Gambit. It turns out that Gambit was captured by Magneto disguised as Eric the Red, and put on trial for joining with Mr. Sinister and the Marauders in the mass murder of the Morlock during the mutant massacre. Rogue was forced to kill Gambit, and his memories flooded into her head. She saved him as Magneto's citadel collapsed, but ended up leaving him stranded in the Arctic, angry at what he'd done and wanting nothing to do with him anymore. Rogue then went to Dr. Aggie at the Aggie Institute for Genetic Studies to see about getting her powers cured. She wanted them gone. She wanted to be able to touch people. Rogue was regularly having dreams of touching and remembering those few times when she was able to, even if it didn't end well. She wanted her dream to be a reality, and that meant no more powers. As she was about to be put into the DNA matrix machine, the doctor's nurse showed up with an assault rifle, and the nurse, turns out, was Mystique in disguise, there to put a stop to the procedure. Rogue ended up keeping her powers, and at Mystique's condo, the two fought, and Rogue stuck her bare hand right on Mystique's face. You know what that means, right? Mystique was now in Rogue's head, and she had the ability to shape change. Rogue was still tempted by that machine right up until the moment it was destroyed. She then went back to the Xavier Institute and embraced Wolverine, as she was back with the X-Men. "Welcome home," he told her. After Cyclops supposedly died, Rogue was made into a field commander. Just a couple of issues later, the Earth became a maximum security prison for aliens. Rogue absorbed the powers of a mutant Skrull named Zakan, so Rogue then joined Storm's Extreme X-Men team. After Gambit returned from his exile in the Antarctic, he and Rogue decided to move in together. They'd made amends. Rogue, with help from the mutant Sage, was able to channel all the power of everyone she'd absorbed during a fight with an alien conqueror named Khan. And in the aftermath of this, a villain named Vargas, the one who'd messed up and killed Psylocke, almost killed Rogue and Gambit by stabbing them both with a spear. But Rogue had both Hulk and Wolverine's powers in her, so she was able to survive. So Rogue was able to defeat Vargas and get revenge for what he'd done. But this ordeal left Rogue and Gambit without their powers, so they left the team and decided to settle down and start a life together in Valle Soleada, California. In her new normal beachside life, Rogue became a motorcycle mechanic. Eventually, Sage came back and asked him for help, but was only able to restore Gambit's powers. Rogue's powers slowly returned on their own, however. And back with the X-Men, she and Gambit were on Havoc's X-Men team. Rogue built her own team. So for her team, Rogue chose Mystique, Iceman, Cable, Cannonball, Omega Sentinel, Sabretooth, and Lady Mastermind. She then took on a villain named Pandemic who injected Rogue with something called Strain 88 that caused her to almost die, so she was hospitalized. The virus altered Rogue's power set to where she wouldn't just absorb power, no, she'd kill whoever she touched. Cable then forced her awake to fight Hecatomb, and in doing so absorbed 8 billion psyches, and it nearly drove Rogue insane. One thing that ended up being trapped in her mind were these diaries written by Destiny, books with writings that could potentially tell the future, which would be incredibly valuable in other words. The team brought Rogue to where she could heal, along with aid from both Emma Frost and Cyclops. And while this was happening, Mystique teamed up with the Marauders and Mr. Sinister. Mystique shot Rogue and brought her to Mr. Sinister, hoping to extract the diaries from her mind. They also helped Hope Summers, the baby that was said to be the mutant messiah. So the X-Men attacked the base to try to recover both Rogue and baby Hope. Mystique ended up killing Sinister with Rogue's death touch, and then was able to use baby Hope to save Rogue, which flushed Strain 88 right out of her body. After this ordeal, Rogue decided to take more time off, and she went to Australia, where she had some adventures including Mystique temporarily taking over her body to fight the Marauders again. Rogue went back to the X-Men, and Professor X was able to quote-unquote fix her mind. He removed Mystique from her head and some blocks so that she was now fully in control of when she absorbed powers and from whom. One of the first things she did was kiss Gambit, proving this power change to be true. The X-Men, Rogue included, then retreated to a safe space called Utopia. At one point, a Predator X herd attacked, and so Rogue absorbed the powers of a group of students to fight them. In a book called Ex Necrotia, a villain named Selene resurrected a bunch of X-Men villains, including Rogue's mother Destiny, although another guy named Proteus inhabited her body. The X-Men defeated them, but it was emotional for Rogue because she had to say goodbye to her mother once again. Then at the funeral for the Sentry, Rogue broke down crying. During the days when she couldn't touch anyone, he was the only one who she could be close to touch, to be intimate with, and now he was gone. When Cable came back to the present with Hope, Bastion and his men went after them. It was then, in protection of Hope, that Rogue absorbed the powers of Wolverine, X-23, Archangel, Psylocke, and Colossus. In trying to get back to Utopia with teleporting help from Nightcrawler, Bastion attacked, and Rogue, with all their teammates' powers absorbed, was able to hold him off, although he did stab Nightcrawler, killing him. In Utopia, Rogue was put in charge of Hope, but when Bastion came, Rogue allowed Hope to fight as well, and together they defeated him, but putting Hope in danger didn't sit well with the rest of the team, and so Cyclops suspended Rogue. There was a time shortly after this that Rogue explored her feelings for Magneto. She was torn between Magneto and Gambit. But then she went with Professor X, Magneto, and Gambit to try to stop the Professor's son, Legion. She ended up absorbing a lot of Legion's powers during that adventure. Then a schism formed in the X-Men teams. Some stayed with Cyclops in Utopia, some left after Wolverine also left. In X-Men Regenesis, Rogue ended up leaving the X-Men team as well. Rogue was turned off by Cyclops' developing ego and his inability to think that he could possibly be wrong. Then, during X-Men vs. Avengers in 2012, some Avengers came to the X-Mansion, now called the Jean Grey School. They were there to stop the X-Men from joining the Phoenix Five, which were Cyclops, Magic, Emma Frost, Colossus, and Namor, who were all possessed with the Phoenix Force. To defend against the X-Mansion, Rogue absorbed the powers of She-Hulk and Moon Knight, two of the Avengers. But later, when she ended up joining Cyclops' team, Rogue squared off with Carol Danvers once more, now with her as Captain Marvel. Rogue was now with the Phoenix Five, and it was up to Captain Marvel to try to get her to leave, and so Rogue and Captain Marvel fought. Rogue tried to absorb Carol's powers again, and Carol said, "You went there after what you did to me? Again?" Carol said to her as she punched her with a force that knocked her right through a wall. She then changed her allegiance away from the Phoenix Five after she saw Magic send Carol to Limbo, which led Magic to sending Rogue to another world. But Rogue made it back to Earth and became a liaison between Cyclops and the Avengers. Rogue then had to absorb the power of a bunch of supervillains to save her and Mimic from a prison riot. And in 2012, as that liaison, Rogue joined Captain America's Unity Squadron to fight with Red Skull. She joined Havoc, Wolverine, Thor, Scarlet Witch, and Cap to take Red Skull and his Professor X brain down. And at one point, Rogue had to absorb Wolverine's powers to try to stop Scarlet Witch, whom everyone thought was helping out the the villainous Apocalypse twins. So what did Rogue do? She murdered Scarlet Witch, but then Rogue was killed by a guy named Grim Reaper. So then the time-traveling Kang came to help the Unity Squad resurrect Rogue, and by issue 21 of that series, Wanda and Rogue had made peace with each other. Rogue then absorbed the powers of many heroes to try to stop a Celestial named Celeste from passing judgment on Earth and killing everyone. So she teamed up with the Sentry to stop the Rogue Celestial. The fallout from this was that Wonder Man was stuck in her head now, and that she wasn't able to touch anyone at will anymore. In 2013, Storm put together an all-female X-team, and Rogue joined her along with Jubilee, Kitty Pryde, and Rachel Gray, but this was brief because it overlapped with her temporary death in Uncanny Avengers, and it would have caused a continuity error. In 2015's Uncanny Avengers, after Rogue was resurrected, she became the field leader on the new Unity Squadron. She was trapped in Pleasant Hill, identified as Claire now. But Rogue had gotten some telepathy training from Professor X and was able to see through the illusion that was the Pleasant Hill prison. And she was also able to fend off an attack by Red Skull. Then in a second Red Skull attack, she was defeated until Deadpool was able to put Magneto's helmet on her head to protect her brain so she could counterattack. She was then in a relationship with Johnny Storm, and when Johnny died, she went out and killed Corvus Glaive for revenge, making her a target of Thanos' Black Order. 2017's Astonishing X-Men by Charles Soule found Rogue on a team in London with Gambit, Bishop, Phantom X, Archangel, Psylocke, Old Man Logan, and Mystique as they were needed to battle Shadow King once again. Rogue then formed a new X-Men team with Magic, Magma, Armor, Inc, and Iceman. And soon, Kitty Pryde sent her on a top-secret mission with Gambit investigating the disappearance of mutants, and this rekindled their old flame. Rekindled indeed. They actually got married in X-Men Gold number 30, and Nightcrawler, Iceman, Storm, and X-23 were their best men and women at their wedding. In the 10th volume of Captain Marvel from 2019, a villain named Nuclear Man brought Rogue and Carol together again, forced to fight once more. But Carol and Rogue ended up teaming up to defeat Nuclear Man instead. And defeated, Nuclear Man wanted his son Som to detonate, but Rogue absorbed Som's energy before he could. Finally, in 2020, Rogue has been running with the X-Men team Excalibur along with Jubilee, Gambit, Trinary, Apocalypse, and Betsy and Brian Braddock, as mutants lived peacefully on the island of Krakoa, surrounded by portals to other places on Earth and another dimension that Captain Britain draws his power from called Otherworld, which happened to be in turmoil. Apocalypse found a gate to Krakoa and tried to use Rogue's power to smash the barrier blocking the portal, but she was overloaded and fell into a coma and laid atop a bed of flowers to rest. They took her by boat to an island off the coast of Cornwall, England, which was the site of the old Excalibur lighthouse. Laying Rogue on the ground in her floral bed opened up a portal, and Apocalypse sent the team into Otherworld to save Brian, while Apocalypse stayed behind with Rogue to defend the island. Then as Dragonfire thinned the veil between worlds and dragons and creatures spilled over to Earth, Rogue reawoke. And enraged, she attacked Apocalypse and took on his form and his powers. And then, in control as she is now, reverted back to human form and got in a hot tub naked with Gambit, saying she didn't want to have a baby, but they wanted to get it on anyway. Then, Jamie Braddock seemingly killed Betsy, and the amulet where they get their power from split, so Rogue and all the team became a new Captain Britain Corps. But that was short-lived, and they went back to getting the portal gate set up. And that's where we leave our Suga in the winter of 2020, an ever-present force in X-Men lore, and one of the most beloved characters in the 1990s X-Men animated series. And that's a wrap on this one, my friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and you'll be one of the first to know when I upload videos just like this each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.